Vickie Wendel has been hooked on history since a young age. Now, after a 30-year career at the Anoka County Historical Society, Vickie is retiring. Her love of history is contagious, and her sheer volume of knowledge is impressive. Ben was able to spend some time with Vickie over the last few weeks and learned a lot about history, Anoka County, and Vickie. Here's the story.
I didn't know we had a county historical society.
But as soon as Vickie Wendel discovered the Anoka County Historical Society, her personal journey went in a whole new direction.
About 2.5, 3 years of volunteering, and then one of the people that had been on the staff decided she was going to retire. So they needed to replace those hours, and nobody worked more than about 15, 20 hours a week at that time. There was 4 people on the staff, and they were all very part-time. So they asked if I would like to take over her job, and having gotten to know her and know what the tours and stuff were, I said sure.
Now 30 years and hundreds of presentations and dozens of exhibits later, Vickie is retiring. After all these years, she still remembers the precise moment when she fell in love with history.
I remember very distinctly, we went as a 6th grade field trip to go see Gone with the Wind. And evidently our teacher must have told us, I don't know how I knew, but somehow I found out that the author of that movie, then book, was learning all her history at the knee of her Confederate grandfather. And I thought, well, you know, that was pretty cool if that's really history. So the next thing I kind of went into was historical fiction, and then I discovered that the real thing was way better than any historical fiction, and it's never stopped.
Vickie's main area of study is the mid-1800s, and especially the Civil War, and Minnesota's and Anoka County's role in that pivotal time in history. For Vickie, history is filled with life lessons.
There are so many lessons we can learn from history. I mean, just basic critical thinking skills. History is a phenomenal way to teach critical thinking skills by looking at history. How people did what they did, why they did it, what happened when they did it, what are the unintended consequences, where does human nature fit into all of that. Amazing lessons that you can apply to every aspect of life. History really can tell us a lot about ourselves, who we are, how we got to be who we are, and we can use those lessons to figure out how we're going to be who we are in the future. So history is vitally important, and when it's in your own backyard, it makes a lot more impact. It's a lot more relevant because, well, it's right here.
When Vickie started with the Historical Society, she made a point to start bringing history to the people and has developed many outreach programs over the last 3 decades.
Going out to the schools, going out to community groups, going out to all these different places was the only way to get history in the hands of these people that are our community. So we started the outreach program with traveling programs. We had all kinds of things like the fair, the threshing show, tried to move our annual meetings all around the county. We really very deliberately made an effort to take history to where people are. If we're going to wait for them to come to us, we're going to die.
Vickie's co-workers have seen her enthusiasm to share the unique facts of Anoka County's history with many different groups and individuals over the years. They have also come to count on Vickie for her institutional knowledge.
She always seems superhuman with her brain. She seems to know everything.
Vickie has a great memory for things, but the other thing is she's a great researcher and a great historian. So I think she does know everything, but what she doesn't know, she knows how to find it.
That's what we're going to miss the most, is that institutional memory, because it saves us so much time in research, because we don't have to go look it up because it's right there.
When I first started, the previous director, who was still living in the community and was a great resource for me too. Like, the best bit of advice she gave me, and I used it until the day I left, was trust Vickie.
Vickie looks back on her career with many fond memories, and she has trouble telling you what her favorite story, memory, or artifact is, saying it probably changes on a daily basis. But she can point to the exhibit that made the greatest impact on the community at large.
We did have one exhibit that won a national award. That was our Vietnam, the Veterans Experience exhibit. That one went in a whole different direction, and exhibits sometimes do that. Took off on its own and became very much its own entity, and we did not expect the healing in the veterans community that came out of that, or in the community at large that came from that exhibit, and we never expected that. It was It still is probably the high point of what I would consider anything that I've done in my career.
During the run of the exhibit, Vicki had a front row seat to watch several veterans go through a historic healing process.
What we saw when we opened it, these vets would come in usually by themselves, or maybe two together would come in. They'd spend a long time in the exhibit, and then they wouldn't say a word, and out they'd go. You'd see them come back, maybe a week or so later, they'd come back. Maybe this time, usually they were by themselves, almost always by themselves the second time. They'd spend a lot of time, and finally they would leave, never say a word. The next time they'd come back, and we watched this. This was a pattern that we actually watched and kept track of. The third time, they came back with family, and they would tell grandkids and kids and spouses stories that these families came back and said, we never heard them talk about that before. The community kind of stepped up too, because they saw that, this is what these guys experienced. It wasn't, grandiose or anything. That's what these guys, and it was repeated over and over. We did, many oral histories, and you'd hear that same theme coming through more and more oral histories. So the community kind of rallied behind the vets. The vets went, wow, somebody listened to us. And that's all they really seemed to want. And by the time it was over, there was this tremendous healing. And in fact, I've had 2 different wives of these vets came to me privately and said, thank you, because he could have somebody listen to him. He doesn't have nightmares anymore.
Vicki continues to engage with local Vietnam veterans, and several came to her retirement party this week. Her coworkers saw how Vicki poured herself into that exhibit and used history to make a difference.
Vicki showed me that you use history to change lives, and she did that with that exhibit and more. She did it in small ways, but with that exhibit, people got help that wouldn't have gotten the help that they needed before, and she used history to do that, and that's incredible.
Going forward, Vicki plans to volunteer for the Historical Society and promises to answer phone calls and text messages asking obscure questions that only Vicki could have an answer for. She also looks forward to more time with family and doing some traveling. As she travels, she will probably visit a historical society or two, but this will always be home. And the good work of the Anoka County Historical Society will continue. But there will never be another Vickie Wendel.
Her spirit is amazing. She's a very positive person, very outgoing person, very caring person.
There's not going to be another one like Vicki. They'll find other people to do the job duties, but there's no replacing her.
For North Metro TV News, Ben Hale reporting.
Vicki said one of the things she is most looking forward to in her retirement is picking and choosing the projects that she gets to work on as a volunteer. Also, she looks forward to walking into the History Center and experiencing an exhibit that she did not create.